Friends, it's good to be here with you. I'm Reverend Meg Whitmer-Fail, and I currently serve as the Associate Director of the Smith Center for Evangelism, Mission, and Church Growth for the Central Texas Conference. I've also been blessed to serve as pastor in many of our churches here in our conference, so I can imagine how eager you are, how eager we all are to return to church for in-person worship with our church families and our friends and our guests. There is no question that we miss being together. As we get closer and closer to resuming in-person worship, we must have plans in place to ensure that we provide as safe an environment as possible. We must also continue to be present through online worship with those who should not or are not ready to return to in-person worship. In the next few moments, I'd like to share with you an outline of a plan that you can use to put your church plan together and have your building, staff, and volunteers ready to welcome people back home. In addition to this overview, you will find helpful guidelines for returning to in-person worship on our conference website at ctcumc.org. As you know, it is strongly recommended by the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, the Governor's Open Texas Plan, and Bishop Lowry that churches employ a multi-phase approach to reopening. Start small and have a clear plan in place. Consider beginning with in-person worship as a first step. As the situation around us improves, then you're encouraged to move to other phases and reintroduce more and more ministries and opportunities to come together. Today, we'll be focusing on Phase 1. Phase 1 is the first phase of returning to in-person worship, and not just for Sunday services. You see, protocols and procedures should also include plans for your church staff and volunteers returning to the office. Make sure everyone is aware of your plan and agrees to follow the rules and guidelines put in place by church leadership for keeping your congregation and themselves safe. Clearly communicate that those in the high-risk group, those over the age of 65, and those with compromised immune systems, that these folks should be highly encouraged to continue to stay home and worship online. Also ensure that your team understands that anyone who is or has recently been ill, whether with COVID-19 or another illness, should not come to services or to the office. Also, in terms of group gatherings, Phase 1 is for in-person Sunday worship services only. Sunday school classes and nurseries and other children's ministry, youth ministry, choir, and other small groups should not begin meeting in person at this time. That's likely a Phase 2 kind of leap. Encourage your small groups, committees, and other ministries to continue meeting online and through teleconferencing services like Zoom, Teams, or GoToMeeting. For the safety of our staff and visitors, it is recommended that church offices be open to visitors with limited hours. For instance, you might choose from 10 o'clock in the morning to 2 p.m. And during this time, visitors should be allowed only by appointment. Ensure that seating in the waiting area allows for appropriate social distancing. Some churches are considering locking office doors even during limited business hours. Any church staff person who is high risk or does not feel ready to return should continue to work from home. Staff and visitors should use appropriate social distancing practices at all times. This includes team and staff meetings. You may need to move these meetings from your normal meeting room space to a larger location. Depending on the size of your congregation, we also recommend multiple services to allow your members to worship at a safe distance. If your church seats 300 and you typically have 200 or more attending worship, that's great. Keep up the good work. However, that also means that it is very unlikely that you can maintain safe social distancing. If multiple services are not an option, you may have to determine the maximum number of attendees for your one service. Once the maximum worship capacity has been reached, greeters will not allow additional folks to enter. This may be difficult. So consider alternatives such as worship reservations. You might also set up worship times by last name. Last names beginning with an A to M might come in person for in-person worship on the first and third Sunday, and N through Z on the second and fourth. Greeters will need to ask each person if they have been ill or currently have a fever. If you have access to a no-touch thermometer, then greeters can scan each person as they come in. As such, you will probably need to limit the number of entrances into the building to ensure that each one has enough greeters to not cause a major traffic jam. Another way to keep from having people congregate at the doors and risk social distancing practices is to have parking lot greeters meet folks at their cars and let them know when it is safe to get in line to enter the building. Or, as you've seen in grocery stores, you can mark spots to stand in line 6 feet apart along the sidewalk. Before entering, everyone should be wearing a mask and keeping a safe distance. First Impressions or your hospitality team volunteers should complete a training course so that they are aware of all their new safety duties. Be clear and concise with your guidelines. All staff and First Impressions hospitality team members should wear masks and gloves and refrain from handshakes and hugs. I know that's going to be difficult. That is the hardest part because we love to hug and shake hands. Door greeters should hold exterior doors open for all guests. They should wear gloves and step away from the door as much as possible when people enter. They should be at their door stations before and after each service. Hand sanitizer should be readily available at each entrance to the building, as well as at each entrance to the sanctuary. Upon entering the worship space, hospitality team greeters and ushers should help direct people to a safe and socially distanced seat and encourage folks not to congregate before or after the service. Every other pew or row should be roped off to keep everyone socially distant. Attendees should sit in family groups with each different family group at least 6 feet away from each other, basically the width of 2 standard chairs. This might mean that only 2 or 3 families will fit on a pew. All hymnals, Bibles, and offering envelopes and attendance books should be removed from the pew, and we encourage you to discontinue using bulletins. Even though they are disposable, someone, or more likely multiple persons, had to fold them, and nobody ever keeps track of their own bulletin anyway, right? This will minimize contact with potentially infected surfaces. If you cannot remove hymnals, etc., then they must be wiped down with a disinfectant cloth between each service. Please, no passing of the offering plate. Instead, use offering stations and make them available at the exits and throughout the facility. Also, continue to strongly encourage online, text-to-give, and mail-in offering options. Again, childcare should not be available in Phase 1. Parents and children will be worshiping together, so encourage parents to bring things to keep small, wandering hands and minds occupied. Anything the church provides must be sanitized between each service, or disposable items provided. Of course, parents always have the option of worshiping online from home. We just want to know that they're always welcome. We recommend that you limit the areas that are publicly available. If possible, lock the doors to areas that are not part of the Sunday morning worship service. Now this. Yes, this part is difficult, and it will be a major blow to Methodists. The coffee and refreshment area. There should be no coffee or food served during this time. If no coffee is a deal breaker, then worshipers must bring their own and not share with their neighbor. There should be no formal meet and greet in the service besides making a wave real big and give an air hug to your neighbor. When it comes time for communion, you should plan ahead, utilizing prepackaged elements passed out by church team leaders wearing gloves and masks. Worship team members should wear a mask whenever they are not singing or speaking from a podium or the pulpit. After the service, First Impressions and hospitality team hosts should help move people along and encourage them not to congregate after the service. Folks should be dismissed by rows to help control exit congestion, and they should be encouraged to move directly to their cars. If they want to chat, they can do it at a safe distance in the parking lot or elsewhere. Between each service, please make sure that your team has enough time to thoroughly clean restrooms, wipe down all pews, doors, and surfaces with a disinfectant, not furniture polish. Consider having someone monitor the restrooms for cleanliness. Gloves and wipes should be made available to anyone who needs them. So these are just some of the minimum steps that need to happen to make sure your church is as safe as possible for in-person worship. Also, please allow me to say that everyone at the conference level has been very impressed with the online worship services and Bible studies and other ministries we've seen throughout the conference. Finally, please continue to live stream your worship services and encourage groups to meet online even long after COVID-19 fades into a remember when memory. We do not want to leave anyone behind if they are not ready to attend in-person activities. We are reaching new people through our online worship, and this is something to celebrate. Friends, your creativity and resilience and courage has been evident as you have adapted to new ways of being the church in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. Stay well and be encouraged as you love and serve God through ministry to all people.